And just in regard to the papers that you would have received, because obviously they've come out in a couple of dispatches. Firstly, you would have received the papers that we received at the last meeting, which include the minutes, the presentations and minutes of when the NHS came to the health scrutinies back in 2015 and then later back to Rutland. Since then, we've also received an update paper from, I think it's combined CCG and UHL paper on their new position in respect of the legal advice that they've received. And those both form part of the formal agenda. Obviously, because of that, I'm quite happy to take questions from either of those papers when it does come to questions, but I do think somewhat that the paper we received more recently supersedes a lot of the information that we see in the initial document. So, but we'll be able to ask questions on both of those papers. In respect of additional papers, I sent around another piece of information that had been written by Sally Ruan. And when I read this, I felt the information that it contained was significant, and that members should have the opportunity to see sight of it ahead of today's meeting. We won't have the opportunity to directly question that. That's just there for another viewpoint, as it were. One thing I've just mentioned to people who have submitted questions in the past, obviously we've not got any questions, representations or statements of case on this agenda, but we will make sure that all of those questions that have been asked in the past are fully responded to, either by way of the Joint Health and Wellbeing Scrutiny Committee or from the CCG themselves. So those questions haven't been missed. But again, some of the things that we discuss here today may impact on what the responses to those are. Just also finally, before we go around and do a round of introductions, I have asked for our legal team to have a representative here today, and I will ask her to come in at a short point in the meeting just to make clear what our position is here as a health scrutiny. So with that, if I can go around again and just ask people to do a very quick introduction to who they are. I'm obviously Ellie, Councillor Cook-Kelvin, and chairing.
Janice Richards, and I'm County Councillor for Leicestershire County Council.
Councillor Fonseca, member.
Julie Hargett, Democratic Support.
Councillor Fonseca.
Councillor Virginia Cleaver as Monsell Ward Councillor.
Councillor Elaine Pantling as Monsell Ward.
Councillor Paul Bremner, Leicester County Council, Market Harbour West and Foxton.
Terry Einan, Leicestershire County Council, Colville North.
Councillor Lynn Moore, Knighton Ward.
Councillor Deborah Sangster, Castle Ward.
Councillor Tom Barclay, Leicestershire County Council.
Councillor Maggie Wright, Leicester County Council, Stony Stanton and Croft Ward.
Rosemary Whitelaw, Democratic Services at the County Council.
Brenda Seaton, County Councillor for Thurmaston and Ridgemere.
Dr Janet Underwood, representing Health Watch Rutland.
Hosha Katecha, Chair of Health Watch Leicester and Leicestershire.
Karen English, East Leicester and Rutland, Council Officer.
Richard Palin, GP in Wigston and Chair of East Leicestershire and Rutland CCG.
Caroline Trevidick, Chief Nurse from West Leicestershire CCG.
John Adler, Chief Executive, University Hospitals of Leicester.
Mark Whiteman, Director of Strategy and Communications at UHL.
Mr John Jameson, Consultant Surgeon, Deputy Medical Director, UHL.
Richard Morris, Director of Operations and Corporate Affairs, Leicester City CCG.
Priti Patel, Leicester City Council, lawyer.
Calvin Sandy, Scrutiny Support Manager, Leicester City Council.
Okay, thank you all. I would just like to say thank you again to the members of the public who probably might be some of your third meeting that you've attended, and also thank you from NHS bosses, because you've definitely come out in force today to show you're all behind this paper, so that's fantastic. Just move on to declarations of interest. Got Janet, Eon and Brembra.
Yes, I declare that I've actually, I was north on the report that went out, and I also sent an individual critique to the councillors before the last meeting, and that wasn't to the City Council, as said. And there have been some doubts about whether I'm a campaigner, and I'm not a campaigner. I belong to Health Watch Rutland, and everything that I say here will be in my capacity as a member of Health Watch Rutland.
Councillor Eon.
Thank you, Chair. I wish to declare an interest as a registered medical practitioner. I'm not currently in practice and do not work for any of the NHS organisations here represented.
Councillor Bremner.
I would like to declare, Chair, that I'm a colleague of Dr. Sally Ruin at the Montfort University, but as concerns this meeting, we have not discussed anything regarding the paperwork. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I would just like to declare that just like I've spoken to NHS bosses when this paper was first set to be published, I have also spoken to Dr. Sally Ruin in respect of her paper that we have seen circulated. At no point was there an attempt to lobby me at all. We just talked about the technicalities of her coming to this meeting here today. Okay, have you got all of those, Julie? Wonderful, thank you. If we move then on to the substantive item number 3. Although obviously I would like you to assume that every member has read and understood the document, if you'd just like to give a short introduction to what is quite a clear and well-written report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm going to kick off with the summary on the basis that I was here last time and therefore the purposes of continuity. But just to emphasise, as the paper makes very clear, that this is very much a joint paper from the 3 clinical commissioning groups who are formally responsible for consultation duties, and University Hospital Leicester as the provider of the services we're talking about. So just to be absolutely clear about the basis of this. So I'm speaking on behalf of all of those organisations, all 4 organisations. I think I'll keep this brief because hopefully, as you said, Chair, the paper is clear in what it says, so I'll just perhaps mention a few things by way of emphasis. I think one of the things I'd like to start off with is to say that I think we all collectively on the sort of NHS organisation side rather regret the position that we've ended up in. I want to really emphasise that it's not been in any way by design. We aren't engaged in some kind of closed-door conspiracy to do things out of the public eye. That's not the way any of the organisations work. I think that is well recognised. So this is very much more by accident than design, and really due to just the way that events have panned out. But we certainly, and that's important to be clear about that, because that plays to how we would like to do things in the future. I won't go too much into the detail of the background because we talked about that last time, as members of the Joint Committee will be all too aware. But the fact is that back in 2015, we reached agreement with Leicester City and Leicestershire County Scrutiny Committees, the separate scrutiny committees, that we would not undertake a formal public consultation around the limited range of changes which we're talking about today, affecting the Leicester General site and obviously the sites to which services are planned to move. At that time, as has been acknowledged, and we've apologised formally for this, we did not go through the same process with Rutland, which we should have done, but that was corrected earlier this year, and the same kind of agreement were reached. It has to be mentioned, of course, that exactly what the 3 committees decided was slightly different, but the practical effect, I think it's fair to say, was the same. There was then a significant delay in actually implementing the plans, simply because we didn't have the funding for them. That was because there was essentially a moratorium on capital funding by central government, which affected the whole of the NHS. Then, as soon as the money became, that a pot of money, which in total was about £300 million, became available nationally as a result of the spring 2017 budget, the system was given an allocation which was mainly for the scheme that we're talking about today. And it's important to be aware of that as well, because we got about 14% in total of the entire national allocation. I mean, nothing like 14% of the NHS, obviously, in England. And that was in recognition of the urgency of needing to get on with this scheme, which is probably a thought to hold as well. So we then made announcements about having received the funding, got very positive sort of reaction to that. So once again, there was absolutely no attempt to keep anything in the dark at that point. We made quite a splash about it because it was the first significant money from national sources for quite some time. And since then, we have been going through the whole process of which you have to go through. Even once the money is allocated in principle, you then have to go through a really quite cumbersome business case process, because you're dealing with a lot of public money, starting with an outline business case, then on to full business case. And it takes quite a while to work through all the internal organisational processes, which were done, by the way, by the CCGs at public boards. Once again, no attempt to keep things under the radar, through to the regional level of the NHS set up, and then on to national approvals. All of that takes many months, which of course can be quite frustrating, but we were moving as fast as we could, such that now we are at the stage where we are about to let the contract for the works to start before Christmas. So we are very much at the very last stages of the process before we put spades in the ground. Now, alongside that, there has been, of course, concerns raised about the absence of formal public consultation. And I think it's also important to emphasise that all organisations, we do understand where that concern is coming from. But as you will see, and we've tried not to equivocate about this in the paper, we have, following taking legal advice about whether it would be appropriate to effectively rewind the process and undertake some kind of formal public consultation at this stage. There are two basic reasons why we have said we can't do that. The first is that we've had very clear legal advice that that would be completely inappropriate in the light of the gunning principles in particular, because a consultation has to be meaningful, and there's no way at this very late stage that a consultation really would be meaningful, and therefore we would leave ourselves open to accusations of a sham consultation. But also, the other key issue is that it will be very expensive and have a very detrimental effect on service progressing and improving our services to introduce what would be a significant delay at this stage. The paper specifies exactly how much we have calculated delay would cost, which is north of £800,000, and explains why that is, because we'll have to change the scheme in order not to delay the congenital heart service transfer, which has to meet to the Royal, which has to meet a deadline, and then the cost of the delay because of the way that the cost of construction works. But also, I think equally importantly, it would have an extremely detrimental effect on the people who work in those services, many of whom are actually in the audience today. Many of the clinical staff who work in those services have planned in detail for these moves. They're complicated moves of important services, and they have to be planned a long time in advance. So we're really sort of well down the track, and it'd be very damaging to morale, recruitment, retention, all those kinds of things if, let me use the phrase, a spanner was to be thrown in the work of that size at this point. So that's why we've come to the very conclusion, the CCGs and the Trust, that we really need to press on, and it's much too late to be going backwards at this stage for all those reasons. However, we are very conscious that we are not in a good place in terms of the perception this has created about the openness or otherwise of the NHS system in this area, and that's why in the paper we make very, very clear that we plan to go out on a major engagement exercise around about both these changes and also our openly stated for a number of years plans for further reconfiguration of services. Once again, there's absolutely no secret about those plans. I remember doing TV and radio interviews about them back in 2014, I think it was, when we first started that. The only reason we're not committing to undertake a formal public consultation on those wider plans at this stage is because we're not submitted to by NHS England, because we do not yet know whether we can get the funding, which is several £100 million. That's all going, and you're not allowed to consult on something you may not have the money for. That is a very strict rule. However, we can do something very open, which we have to call engagement, which would have many of the sort of similar characteristics, whilst once again, of course, on top of that, being committed to full public consultation when we're permitted to do that. We are still in the bidding process for funds. We have a regional, what's called a regional assurance panel coming up in a few weeks, which is the next stage of the process. But the decision making on that wider plan nationally is some way off at the moment. And finally, so that is an absolutely clear commitment which we would expect to be held to. We would very much welcome the involvement of scrutiny committees as well as the wider public in that, for reasons that will be self-evident. And the last thing I'd like to say, just quickly, is the paper also deliberately makes a very clear statement that this is not the thin end of the wedge, in the sense that these changes are urgent for all the reasons that we've stated many times before. We do need to press on with them, but they do not mean that they undermine the future of the viability of the Leicester General site as a whole. They are freestanding in that sense. We make no bones that they're consistent with the direction of travel that we've publicly stated for a number of years now, but these changes are freestanding, and that's why we've made that statement very clearly in the paper. And we'd also expect to be held to account for that. Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay, thank you, John Adler. I thank you very much for your candour in the report, and obviously members will have opportunity to respond to it in a while. What I thought we'd first do, though, was take a representation from Sally Ruan. Again, this is given in the Constitution that I'm allowed to ask members of the public to come up to the table and make a representation if I felt that it was significant for the discussion. In the vein of the fact that we've not actually got the paper formally published from Sally, I thought giving her the opportunity of a 5-minute statement would be appropriate. And in fact, what that does is also allow the CCG to formally come back on their position following that. So with that in mind, Sally, we'll give you 5 minutes to address the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The CCG-UHL paper is a joint paper, but does not set out clearly the position of the CCGs. UHL went to 2 scrutiny committees in 2015, but it appears that the CCGs did not. UHL believes that the response of the 2 scrutiny committees legitimised their wish to avoid public consultation, but the CCGs do not offer any explanation as to why, back then or since, it would appear that they did not fulfil their legal duties to involve the public through consultation. These legal duties cannot be waived or delegated, and the duty to consult a HOSC is not an alternative to involving the public through consultation, but in addition to it. But UHL's position is also difficult, not only because it omitted Rutland back in 2015, but because it went to the wrong committees. It should have taken the relocation of Level 3 ICU to a mandatory joint scrutiny committee. It alone has the legitimacy to comment on a matter which affects people across more than one local authority area, but the joint committee was never consulted. So it seems to me that the claim that a decision was made to relocate ICU without public consultation cannot be justified on the grounds that it was made in the full knowledge of the wrong 2 scrutiny committees. So the decision, which the paper says was made in 2015 and reaffirmed since, has a problematic status. It seems it was made by CCGs without fulfilling their legal duties, and so arguably is invalid. I suspect a judicial review looms in everybody's minds. The decision is also problematic because it seems to have been made essentially on clinical grounds. Now, obviously, clinical grounds are very important, and UHL can argue a good clinical case. And I think we will hear a lot today about UHL's passionate commitment to patient care and saving lives. But the matter is not purely a clinical issue. It has implications for the future of the General and for the wider network of health services and the way in which patients and public engage with those services. Regardless of the fact that some services are left in place at the General, it is stretching credulity to insist that the removal of a core service does not have some impact on the likely future of the General, in a context where we know the long-standing goal of the NHS leaders locally is to close it as an acute hospital. We are told that we can have engagement on those issues, but engagement falls a long way short of consultation. We are told we cannot have consultation on those issues until there is surety of money. We first expected a consultation on acute reconfiguration in November 2015 under Better Care Together, but it has been repeatedly postponed since, and it might be years before it takes place. So a future consultation does not offer a reason for not consulting now. Instead, this ever-retreating future consultation points precisely to the wisdom of having a consultation now. The removal of Level 3 ICU from the General actually offers the perfect opportunity to enable the public to express their anxieties and concerns about how decisions today affect the services of tomorrow. The CCG should engage systematically with people's anxieties, views, and yes, knowledge. Some of the public are knowledgeable. Instead, the message seems to be that the public have nothing of interest or relevance to say on this matter. I'm sure the CCGs do not intend to send this message, but it is a message which some people feel they are receiving.
You've got about 30 seconds left.
The consultation will cost money, but it would have cost money anyway. There will be a financial hit, but that is because local decisions did not fulfil their legal duties to make sound decisions. There will be an impact on the Children's Heart Centre, but I'm sure that the very capable management of UHL will manage that by the deadline concerned. There is a reference, or has been in the past, to the possibility of losing the £30 million of public money, but that would be an interesting development, since presumably NHS England and NHS Improvement have to ensure that all the legal requirements have been fulfilled before they sign off the project. Did they do that properly?
Sorry,
I don't
can I
know.
ask you to make your closing comments, Sally? Thank you.
I have not discussed this with them, but I believe our elected representatives inside and outside the room would be happy to make strong representations to NHS England on the importance of retaining funds. The fact that a decision was made in 2015 or afterwards does not invalidate a public consultation at this stage, because, as I have said, the decision appears to have been made in a way that does not have a solid legal footing. The best thing now is to regularise the situation by reversing the decisions pending formal public consultation. This can be done by submitting papers to that effect to the governing bodies of local NHS institutions. Then the public can finally express their views, ask their questions, see the equality impact assessments and so forth, and contribute to the future of their health services as indicated in the NHS Constitution. This is an opportunity to apologise, to regularise and to restore community trust.
Right, thank you, Sally. Just before I ask for a response, I'd just like to acknowledge the fact that Councillor Waller has also joined us here in the meeting. No, not a problem, not a problem. I think you snuck in at 10 past, so that's absolutely fine. You've been here plenty of time. With that, if I can ask if one of the members from the NHS wanted to respond to some of the points that Sally put forward.
I dare say CCG colleagues might want to pick up. So do you want to start actually in terms of the CCG position?
So as a GP, I work in the CCG to try and improve quality care for patients.
Sorry, I am just conscious we do want to get to a debate as well, so if we can just try and respond directly to some of the points, that would be helpful. Sorry, I'm not trying to curtail you.
Okay. So this is about quality of care for patients. This is the need to do this. It's about having enough staff to look after patients on 3 sites, about having the level of consultant cover at 3 sites in a market where there are declining numbers of medics available to do this work, and nationally recruitment is very difficult. I regret that the CCG wasn't as involved in the meetings 3 or 4 years ago as they should have been, and I regret that the level
sorry to interrupt you, Gwen. I do apologise, and I respect what you were saying to us, but what you were saying has already been said. I actually just want to know if there's anything in particular that you wanted to respond to from Sally's statement.
Can I just pick up one specific thing? Sally said that it would be appropriate to go to consultation now. Just to repeat that is not the legal position as we understand it, having taken professional legal advice.
Okay, thank you. I would very briefly now just like to bring in our legal advice, just to clarify for members of the Commission what the responsibility is towards the joint health and wellbeing scrutiny and what the duty is towards the public. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to start with, I would like to be clear that the issue of public consultation is a matter for the CCG. And as we've heard today, they have sought their own independent legal advice regarding that. Sorry, is that better? Would you like me to repeat what I've just said? Yeah, absolutely. I'd just like to start by saying that the issue of public consultation is a matter for the CCG, and they have, as we've heard today, sought their own independent legal advice regarding that, so I cannot comment on that aspect. What I can reiterate and clarify is that the duties owed to HOSC in terms of consultation with HOSC relay in the regulations of 2013, and they specifically state what the requirements are for the CCG or health bodies to consult with the Scrutiny Committee. Based upon that, what needs to be clarified today is that if HOSC feel that adequate consultation has taken place with them, then that is where effectively their powers would lie.
Okay, thank you. So if I was just to add to that, I'd say that as far as their duties go towards the HOSC, we need to determine whether we feel that they have discharged those duties. But their duty to consult the public is an entirely separate duty, one which comes under public law. We are not in a position to instruct them to undertake a public consultation, although I do feel it's appropriate for us to come to a viewpoint as to whether they should or not. And I hope that clarifies things for members of the Commission. I'm going to go back to where we kind of left off in the last meeting, because I know that there have been a few members who had wanted to speak and ask questions at the end of the last meeting before we had to call it to a close. So with that, I'm going to actually invite Councillor Dr Lynn Moore, then Janet Underwood, and then Councillor Elaine Pantling. If others want to signal if you want to contribute, please. Thank you. So, Councillor Dr Lynn Moore.
Thank you, Chair. In a sense, the questions that I was going to ask last time have been preempted by the current document. So, is it okay for me just to comment rather than ask questions. Is that okay? Thank you very much for that. Well, I mean, I think John has already said and admitted that you're in an unfortunate position. It's really bad that you are where you are, and things obviously didn't go politically right, etc. It's difficult for me because I'm not a lawyer. I am a councillor. I am also a member of the public. I read the paper with great interest. I had lots of questions about it, but they're more for the future and the exercise that's going to be happening when you get the money to do the development that you're going to propose and do the consultation on that. The clinical case to me was made beforehand and certainly in this paper that the services will be safer, there's going to be staffing issues resolved, you're going to create a really good training model by moving the beds to the Royals. We've had legal advice, I know, from our legal advice. But I don't really, you can take a legal position, and I think Sally presented some excellent legal arguments. Very, very clear. I could actually follow them, so thank you for that. What should have been done and wasn't done. And I think, in a sense, you've presented a very, very good model for what should govern the forthcoming project and accompanying consultation. In a sense, to be in the common parlance, your card has been marked, and you need to be aware of that and move forward. There's a well-known game in psychology, and forgive me because I am a psychologist, by God, I've forgotten his name, but it's called Now I've Got You, excuse me, it's going to be bad language, son of a bitch. And I don't know if anybody knows about that game, but it's citing the legal arguments and putting all the weight on those. I feel, as a member of the public, and I can acknowledge those legal arguments, but speaking as a member of the public, speaking of somebody who's getting to a pretty ripe old age, might be in need of ICU, etc., etc., there's almost a moral imperative to put patients' interests above what should have been done legally and what's got to be done legally in the future. So I'm glad to hear that you apologised, because that was going to be one of my questions. Will you apologise? But you're saying you have, so that's good. Will you undertake to carry out a full consultation? I think you've said that you're going to do that. So at the moment, my position is, rather than argue for a public consultation, and it's up to the public to go for a judicial review and try to get that decision made, my personal position as a councillor and a member of the public is, I am okay about you going ahead without a public consultation because of the cost of it and the delay in getting those services up and running. Because in my world, interests of patients have got to take an absolute premium over anything else. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Dr. Lynn Moore. I can never remember which way round to say it. Janet Underwood.
I've got 3 points that I'd like to raise, if that's okay. The first point I would like to address to the CCGs and ask them why they didn't fulfil their consultation duties right at the outset, and why, in particular, when Health Watch Rutland had been raising queries about consultation with both the East Leicestershire and Rutland CCG Chair and the Chief Executive of UHL since 2017, it's also been publicly raised at CCG meetings that there's a lack of consultation, and it's the duties of the CCGs to raise that point. Why haven't they done so, and why have they not taken our comments on board? So that's my first question. My second question is that I've read through the course of what you need to do, what they need to do for consultation, and it should be taken to the joint HOSCs after the pre-consultation business case has been done, but before the strategic outline case has been done. And that is clearly, it's not been to the joint HOSC, and it clearly didn't go to Rutland at that time. So I want to know how can they legally carry on saying we've done public consultation when, as far as I'm aware, the first time the joint HOSC was approached was in September. And then my last point is that the UHL have consistently said that this, and they've repeated it here today, that this reconfiguration is not part of the STP. It's being funded by a capital bid from the STP, and the NHS England guidance, planning and assuring and delivering service change for patients, quite clearly says that any new plans that they accept will have to align with the STP. So my argument basically is we've not had public consultation and we need it before proceeding.
Okay, thank you. If you'd like to come back on this, because I think they're three quite important key issues. So
the first point about why didn't we, as the CCG, fulfil our obligation. As a health system, we work in partnership. It was agreed at that stage that we would work as a group of health organisations, and we're quite legally entitled to do that. So we followed the rules and the process that UHL were undertaking. We got it wrong. We've said that we're happy to accept and apologise for not having managed that in the right way. Once the issue around Rutland was raised, UHL went straight out to Rutland HOSC and did what we thought was the right thing to do at the time. If that wasn't adequate, then again we'll have to apologise for that, but that was exactly what we did. We responded to the request to go to Rutland HOSC once it was unearthed that we hadn't actually done that. And then the third part, I think there must be a bit of misconception about this particular plan not being part of the STP. Everything that we're doing in health at the moment is part of the STP. It's very clearly part of the forward journey, the strategic direction of the STP. It's been included in all the published documentation. We can refer back to the strategy documents of UHL in 2015, and it's very clearly in there. So I think it's, I'm clear, and we're all clear, that it is out there in the public, and it is part of the overall strategy for the health system going forward.
okay, thank you. With the question about which scrutiny committees you went to and going back to Rutland Health Scrutiny at a later date, would you agree now in hindsight that in fact actually because the joint HOSC by this point in 2018 was fully operational, that in fact actually rather than going to Rutland HOSC individually, what you should have then done is come to the joint HOSC?
Quite possibly, but what we did do was go back to Rutland Council and ask them what their preference was at the time, and they wanted us to go to Rutland and talk to them specifically, so we responded to that request.
Thank you. Janet, you're indicating you wanted to come back.
Yes, there's 2 points that I'd like to say. First of all, the individual HOSCs do not have the legal power to make any decision when the case crosses local authority boundaries. And secondly, I suspect that the people here are confused, probably as confused as I am, because sometimes this project is part of the STP and sometimes it's not part of the STP. And that is carried through into the full business case as well. It's already been said here that it's not part of the wider configuration. This lady says that it is. It can't stand like that. There's a confusion.
Okay, John, you wanted to come in.
Can I help with that? How can I put this? What we've said very clearly, talking about the SDP as if it's some kind of, I very much endorse what Karen just said. The SDP is simply the name given nationally to the local plans and the way of going forward, as Karen just explained. So I do think that thinking about it in terms of is it part of the SDP, is it not part of the SDP, is a bit erroneous. We've said very clearly that this is a freestanding set of changes, but They are consistent, as you would expect. It would be very bizarre to do something that wasn't consistent and would risk wasting a lot of public money in the future. It is consistent with the general direction of travel, which is also part of the STP and has been stated publicly many, many times, but that is still going to need to be fully publicly consulted on, as I was saying right at the beginning. So it's, I think the concern about is it part of the STP or not isn't really the point, if I might say so.
Okay, if I can just come in on that, because actually one of the things that I spoke to John about when we first sort of drafted this report was actually for the Health and Wellbeing Scrutiny Commission to have reassurances that when they move the ICU from, if or when they move the ICU from the Leicester General Hospital, this in fact won't have an impact on the other services that they provide there, so therefore it not necessarily being deemed as the thin end of the wedge, and therefore it's inevitable that other services are going to be removed from there. I think in part you've done that in this report, but I don't think for our benefit we've had enough reassurances that in fact this decision won't impact directly on some of the services that are already there. You've been quite open about your broad plans for 3 to 2, so you know, I agree in some part that whether this is part of the STP or not is actually immaterial. But I do think that the Joint HOSC will probably want to see more assurances that moving the ICU does not impact on other existing services at the Leicester General Hospital. Okay. Councillor Pantling.
Mine's really a comment. It's not really a question. And you have, in theory, had 3 years to consult. And I think, personally, that this is very remiss of you as a trust to not consult, especially when the people, the public, have a high regard for the NHS. And it was their fight and their determination that helped secure the Children's Heart Unit. I think that everyone appreciates the work that the clinicians and all the staff do, but do not dismiss the voice of the people, as we are people who really want to stand with you, so do not deny that right.
Thank you, Councillor Pantling. I've got Councillor Enon.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I was particularly interested in the, I think, the middle part of your paper, and I think, Chair, the accident design. You know, there was no design, I think, to get into this mess. But I suppose I'm also aware that we didn't design to have 3 separate hospitals across Leicester City, and that's a design feature that I've struggled with in my life as a GP in the area. I've also got a vested interest in the sense that my husband was an ITU patient in the summer. So I know that this operation needs to happen. While they were trying to save his life, they were also lobbying us madly as he lay in bed to try to sort out ITU. So I know that this operation needs to happen, but I think we need to separate the consent for the operation from the operation itself. And however much I might say, yes, this operation is necessary, I was there back in 2015 when the NHS came to the health scrutiny in Leicestershire, and at that point they made it quite clear to us the patient was on their last legs, they couldn't give consent, there was no time, we had to do this operation in a hurry, and would we, the relatives as it were, would we mind if they went ahead without getting formal consent from the patient who was in no fit state to give it? And we said yes. Where we are now, unfortunately, is somewhat different, because the operation didn't happen by December 2015, as we were told it would do. We weren't, as the relatives, kept updated as to what they were doing with our patient. And we're back here now being told this urgent operation needs to happen now, the patient's already anaesthetised, can we get on with it? And I'm going, hang on, I don't even, you know, is the patient anaesthetised? I don't think they are, because they're here. The public who own this service and pay for this service are here, and I think they're a little bit annoyed that we've got to, as medics, we're going, trust me, I'm a doctor, this is the right thing, the right operation to do, and we're going to go ahead without your consent. So I think we've got to, you have got in a bit of a pickle here, and I'm very glad to have heard that sense that you don't want to be in this pickle. So my sensible question then is, having got into this mess which we are in, knowing that this operation does need, I personally, clinically think it needs to go ahead, we need to know how we're going to manage the future, because this is or is not part of the STP. I think it almost certainly everything has to be about being sustainable and transforming. I need to know at what point formal public consultation can take place in any of these, because what we're being told is that the NHS says we're not allowed to consult on anything we haven't got the money for. Now, I suspect that this is simply about them managing public expectation and not wanting us to come out with placards. I think in Leicestershire we managed public expectation exceedingly well over the Children's Heart Unit, and they did come out with placards. So I'd like to know in which document the NHS have actually written down that we are not allowed to consult on something we don't have the money for, because unless that is actually written in blood, I don't believe it. And I think that we need to be getting on and consulting with the public. Yes, we might want to let you get on with this, I don't know, and I would want to know what the rest of the committee thought of that. But we certainly can't allow the entire situation of the STP to keep drifting on, and every time you get some money, you come back and go, oh, we've got the money now, can we not consult?
Thank you. I'm actually going to take Councillor Berkeley and Councillor Wright also at this point, if I may. Thank you.
It seems to me clear that the medics feel very strongly that this is needed. It was needed 3 years ago. Since then, they have been patching it together with plaster. It appears to be the best thing for the people of Leicestershire, Leicester City and Rutland. The NHS has apologised for not undertaking consultation. The money may be at risk if they don't proceed with it. In fact, they're ready to go and do it and improve the services, improve the training for the staff, make the health service more efficient. They have apologised. They have said they're going to undertake major engagement with the public. As a member of the public and a member of this committee, I feel strongly that the majority of the public, now it is only my feeling, would want to have better services. Is this the best way to do it? Well, we have been assured by the paper, by the clinicians, that this is the way to go. Are we going to shut down Leicester General Hospital? We have been assured that will not be the case. Nothing is forever. Things move ahead. We have spent 3 years debating this, and we are sitting here telling each other that this is what needs to happen, but we have to put a block in the way to stop it happening yet again. That doesn't make sense to me. I am not a health expert, I am not a legal expert, but common sense dictates to me, if we have the opportunity to make things better for the people of Leicestershire and the people who provide these services and work in the front line day to day are saying this is the way we should go, why on earth are we not doing it?
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Councillor Berkeley. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mine's really a comment to say that I really don't like the fact that there has been no consultation. For me, it's our NHS, it's your NHS, it's everybody's NHS, and everybody deserves the right to have a comment, regardless of what those comments are. So what I would say is please, please learn lessons for this and give us reassurances going forward. And I'm really pleased today that we've seen this apology. For me, I think I echo what Dr Moore said right from the beginning, that the risks for me now going forward are significant. The risk to patients, the risk to residents of Leicester and Leicestershire, the loss potentially of capital, and also the long-term future of strategies that you've already got in place with the Children's Hospital. So please, please learn from this. I'm not happy with it at all, but we are where we are.
Okay, thank you. If I'd like to give you an opportunity to come back on Councillor Eon's point about public consultation.
I'll take that one. I mean, I absolutely echoed the frustration around the capital planning process. Believe me, I echo it. I mean, I've been partially to pulling together the capital strategy, the state strategy for the whole of LLR, and it's been a nightmare trying to get that sort of up to government. I haven't got it with me today, but I will share. I'm happy to share the guidance that says that we can't consult until the capital has been approved. Nonsense, but that's the rules, and that's the rules that we have to abide by. We have, going forward, we have the business cases in place at a pre-consultation business case stage that we need to come and engage with the public on, and you've heard from John to say there's a full series of engagements that we haven't learned the lessons, that we will go out early, starting next month, and we'll talk about not just the capital plans that are around the physical buildings, but also the changes to the community services going forward. So we have learnt lessons, absolutely taken this as a slap on the wrist. If there's no, my job title is accountable officer, I am accountable, I'll take that on the chin, and we will move forward. All I can say is, I've worked in the health service for 35 years. The rules change. The rules change all the time. They've changed in the last 3 years since we started the plans around the ICU. They've changed twice. It is frustrating, but we haven't got everything right as we go forward. But I'm happy to share that as we move on.
Chair, I think this is a really important issue that the Joint Health Scrutiny Committee could take forward. Using this information, surely we should be challenging the Secretary of State at making it so difficult for the NHS to be open and transparent.
Certainly take your point on board. For me, though, I understand reasons that have been given in the past for why no formal public consultation can go ahead. For me, this is more about, in principle, whether you want it, whether there's a will for a consultation on this to go ahead or not. I'll let you come back.
I won't comment on this particular case, but going forward, we have to consult. We know that, we understand that, and actually, as I've said, I will take back to my colleagues in the CCGs the responsibility that we have to do that, and we will consult as soon as we are able to consult, but we also have a responsibility to engage, and we believe we're reasonably good at doing that. We could be better, and we're moving on with that.
Yeah, I think with all due respect, although we getting assurances that you will be doing this in the future, we have been seeking these assurances for the last 18 months, and they haven't been forthcoming until we started to press these buttons. Sorry, I've got Councillor Fonseca, Councillor Sangster, then Councillor Waller, and then Councillor Bremner that have indicated.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, as an elected member of North Evington Ward, that's quite near to General Hospital, I feel the public are not too happy about this at all. There are people living in the fringe, the hard-to-reach people, which often comes to my surgeries, and they express their dissatisfaction or being upset about that as well. As a councillor, I think I have my duty towards the public. When we have a batch to be installed in a particular area, the local authority go for a small consultation. So why this big massive thing hasn't gone to consultation? I'm pretty straightforward there, and what I will wish is that a consultation should be arranged for this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Sangster.
Mr. Adler, I listened to your presentation with keen interest, and there was something about your presentation that suggested to me you were speaking out of your shadow. So you began by saying what you're not doing, So we're not trying to pull the wool over your eyes. We're not trying to get this through without any proper discussion, but we are where we are. I remain unsatisfied. I don't think that there has been adequate consultation. And I also think that if you are apologising, and that is a very important and very big thing for you to do for the size of the organisation and so on, if you are apologising, then something different has to be done now. It's not that, oh, we'll learn the lesson and do it better in the future because tomorrow we're all going to be perfect. What I'm saying is that if you are apologising, I, as a representative from Castle Ward, need to see that something is changing now. You know that you had a responsibility to consult and to taking your analogy from 2015, to use the recognition from 2015 to now is really not acceptable. So I think my question is, if you're apologising, what's going to change now, not tomorrow, not for the next time, what's going to change now? If you're saying that national recruitment is difficult, then that's not about whether you consult or not, is it? It's a different question. If you're saying that that some kind of public consultation has to be done and it has to be meaningful, then how do you know that if you had consulted properly, you would still be making the same decision now? Because surely consultation is supposed to mean something. I'm simply not satisfied. And when you said that, and this is where I was alerted, when you said that a consultation would provide a spanner in the works, I just wondered who the works was on behalf of. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll give you an opportunity to respond to 3 very clear questions there from Councillor Sangster.
Obviously, we collectively have apologised for where we've got to with this, and that's clearly being acknowledged by members of the committee, which we're grateful. Essentially, I do understand the point that you're driving at there. I can see why you would want to change something now, but the position we are in, what we are saying collectively as the NHS organisations responsible for this, is that we can't go backwards now because it would be too damaging to the service, and we don't think it would be lawful on the basis of the advice we've received. But the main thing is that we simply think it would be very damaging to do that now, and that's why, and many councillors have explained why that's the case in the course of the discussion. That's why we don't think it's appropriate to do that, and we've tried to just be very clear about that and explain the reasons in the paper and in the discussion. We just don't think we can go back. We don't think it's the right thing to do for services and for patients.
Okay, sorry. I think one of the other questions was about national recruitment.
Sorry, do you mind?
In your presentation, you said that you have difficulties.
Use the mic.
In your presentation, you said a number of things. In addition to the changes being freestanding, which I didn't understand, you said that national recruitment was difficult, and it's difficult to recruit to 3 sites. But that really doesn't have anything to do with whether you should have consulted or not, does it? Because national recruitment is a national issue, a national and ongoing issue. So,
well, it plays to the urgency of the case, and of course there are arguments about the passage of time, and that's why we're in the difficult position we're in. We make no bones about this, but we're talking about that, and we talked about it at the last meeting, simply on the basis that it's very difficult to recruit, and it's particularly difficult to recruit to the general ICU site because of the case mix. Essentially, it doesn't have the mixture of cases that's attractive to clinicians, and that's one of the driving forces behind it. John Jameson might want to expand on that if you'd like him to.
Yeah,
so if I've understood the question properly, we need to have the appropriate staff, to both nurses and doctors, to staff our hospitals. We are in competition with the whole of the rest of the country for those staffing levels. We've got to make our organisation a place where people want to come and work. If they see an ITU that doesn't, for example, an ITU that doesn't serve their needs, they will go elsewhere for those jobs. If they see a hospital where there's been no real development for whatever it is, 20 odd years since I've been there, that is not attractive for people to come and work, and that's the world we live in.
Okay, thank you. I think we've heard this argument in relation to other services in the city before, so I think it's something that the Commissioner are probably quite well versed on. Councillor Sanks, are you happy that answers your questions so far? Thanks. Are you happy that answers your questions so far? You're never happy. Okay, as long as we have that statemented, Deborah is never happy. No. Thank you. If we move on now, I've got signed, I've got Councillor Waller, Councillor Bremner, Councillor Richards and then Councillor Cleaver. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm having a technology problem here. I was not terribly impressed as a representative of the people of Rutland County Council to be described earlier this afternoon as an issue. Once the issue around Rutland was raised, you then came to our scrutiny panel. We are not an issue, we are an integral part of this health setup, and it might be nice if we were treated that way occasionally. We hear about consultations going on. Where do they go? It's Leicester City. I'm sorry, of course you need to be consulted in Leicester. It's parts of Leicestershire. Rarely do they happen in Rutland. And when they do, rarely are they well enough advertised in order to get the people of Rutland there to express their views. So that's my grumble, if you like, for this afternoon. What I'm going to say now, though, I am speaking on behalf of the scrutiny panel of Rutland County Council. Coincidentally, we met last night, and at the end of the meeting, under any other business, I raised that I was coming here today and got their endorsement to what I planned to say. So I am speaking on behalf of us all. When this business was presented to us in April this year, we were very disappointed that you came to us 3 years after you'd gone with the same urgent case to the other two councils. We recognised the urgency, we understood the clinical necessity as you described it, and we accepted your professional view, notwithstanding the fact that we felt we hadn't been properly engaged. We did believe that you would do a public consultation, though, and had you started that back in April, it would have been concluded by now. We subsequently discovered that our Health Watch colleagues had contacted you back in 2017 when the money was announced for you, asking you to undertake public consultation then, which didn't happen. I don't know why. I don't believe this can't consult till the money's available argument, because if you follow that through logically, can't consult till the money's available. When the money's available, you're too far down the road to consult. It's meaning there is no consultation. So I'm not, that just goes over my head, I'm afraid. Also, whilst I hear all the good words you're saying this afternoon about public engagement, I want it a bit firmer than that. I want you to be saying to us, we will come and talk to this scrutiny panel about the STP, or I'm sorry, I've forgotten what you're now calling it. We will talk about our longer term plans with you, and we will go out to the public, engage with the public and give them some options to comment on, and we will look at their comments. That actually, technically, isn't what you're saying. And I am very well aware of how easy it is to consult and not consult all at the same time, or engage and not engage all at the same time. At our last meeting, I mentioned the local authority statutory duties to consult on our local plans. We all do consultation prior to the statutory bit in order to inform our local plans that become the document on which we statutorily consult. And I cannot see why all of you in health, whether you're CCG or the hospital, can't have a consultation, call it engagement if you prefer, which helps shape the future, which is what it's all about. And then, when you come to a consensus and you get the money, then you can do the formal, this is what we've agreed jointly, this is the best fit, are you in favour? Thank you very much, Chairman.
Sorry, I've had both Mark and John indicate to come back in. John?
Just to start with Councillor Wallace's last point, what you just said is exactly what we are committing to. We're going to have the fullest possible level of public engagement, including physically in Rutland, just to be absolutely clear about that, because it's very much an integral part of the area that we serve. And I don't think I could phrase it any better to you. Full engagement. We simply can't call it and present it as public consultation because the rules do not allow that. Karen was referring earlier on to the pre-consultation business case, which we're currently putting through the system. The clue is in the name. You have to have that case approved, and then you have to have some idea, some prospect of getting what is a very large amount of public money before you're allowed to form a public consultation. But we can do exactly what you described, and that's what we're collectively committing to do as soon as it's practical. And there's diary dates being put in at the moment to do that in the timescale that's committed to in the paper. I have to say, Councillor, I was a bit puzzled by what you described as your recollection of what happened at the meeting earlier in the year with the Rutland Scrutiny Committee. I've got the minutes of that discussion in front of me. I wasn't personally there, as you know, so I can't say from personal experience, but the minutes do say that the panel endorsed the plan to consolidate ICU at the Royal and the Glenfield. There's a number of other more detailed points.
Sorry, John, I will interject there because we already know that I've questioned how you interpreted the minutes from the Leicester City Health and Wellbeing Scrutiny Commission in terms of what we had agreed or not agreed back in 2015. So I'll just give a note of caution in terms of reading out minutes from the Rutland meeting.
Okay, I take your point, Chair. I was only going to say that there certainly isn't a reference to carrying out a consultation. So our genuine understanding was that that wasn't a requirement, and we did, of course, apologise for the fact. I mean, it was a straight error that we didn't involve Rutland much earlier on, and we've also apologised for that.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Bremner. Sorry, yes. Come back on that one. Absolutely.
Thank you. I was at the meeting. I did raise the issue of consultation at the meeting, and we very much said that we expected, if you'd got the money, for the consultation to happen. The fact that it wasn't minuted is neither here nor there. Minutes are not a verbatim record of the meeting in Rutland. They never have been. Whether your colleagues heard that message, of course, I'll accept they may not have done, but we felt we'd given the message.
Thank you, Councillor Waller. Councillor Bremner, Councillor Richards, and then Councillor Cleaver.
Thank you, Chair. My personal experience of CCG rests in Market Harbour a few years ago, and I know that in procurement of budgets, which are huge, there are timelines and there are difficulties in terms of getting business cases together. What I see here is that the patient need is acute, the staffing need is acute, but I think I would sum it up like this, that you received a kick in the teeth about consultation. And I think I look across the room from me and I see Mark Reitman, Director of Communications. I look at the CCG and I see nothing. I don't know who you are, and I wonder whether you have a good communications director to communicate with the public in consultation. It's just, as a member representing the public, I'm giving a public view of what I see and what I've experienced. And I think, like everybody sitting in this room, I've had great experience of local NHS personally in the family, but I have less good experience of hearing plans and hearing future plans, particularly from a CCG perspective, although you said you work together. And I think that message is a bit confusing for the public. You need to get to a one voice coming from you, because you're clearly giving mixed messages. And I think that needs to be resolved in this. Having said that, I'd like to take you to point 3.1 on page 2 of the paper. And I think I'm correct in saying we've talked about consultation moving forward. 3.1, may I read it, Chair? Yeah. The consolidation plan cannot be implemented immediately due to a national capital funding shortfall, and as stated in the paper submitted to the Joint Committee on the 4th of September 2018, temporary actions were put in place to maintain the service, whilst capital was sought to undertake the building work necessary to effect the move of the services from Leicester General Hospital. That raises two questions in my mind. One is, what is the timeline for the building at Glenfield? And what plans are in place to preserve the integrity of Leicester General Hospital? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just ask Councillor Richards to come in and then we can get response to those questions.
Thank you. Who's after me if you're not back? I'll be back. You'll be back. Okay. Thank you. Yes, I think we've had a good airing of the issues that are before us. But if I was in need of urgent clinical care, I would want the best possible outcome, as everyone would. So if that means consolidating level 3 to the Leicester Royal Infirmary, as there is, and I see it as there's no other options because we've been informed, by delaying it, I think patients' lives could be jeopardised, and I would hate to see that, as we all would, and so would the public as well. So we have to move forward. We can't keep going round and round the table. We've had some really good questions, good answers, but if we don't move forward with this, I feel that we'll be letting the public down. And can I ask the question, is it possible that we could lose the funding if we keep going on and on and on? Can I ask that question, please? Thank you.
So perhaps if I start with Councillor Bremner's questions. The timeline is that we're looking to start the work as soon as practicable, so that in October stroke November. And then the project timeline, John will remind me, is March 2020 to have the whole thing complete. There are, of course, a set of different moves to both Glenfield and to the Royal Infirmary. So that is the timeline. In terms of maintaining the integrity of services, could I just clarify? Do you mean whilst that is going on, whilst that, or after that move?
It's more in regards after the move.
Yeah.
Because does something fill the gap? Or, clearly there are links within that hospital, and how are you managing perhaps a severing of a link and then building up?
Yeah, we cover some aspects of that. John might want to expand on this if you'd like more detail from a clinical point of view, but we cover the key interrelationships in section 5.3. Which talks about high dependency care and transfer services on the very rare occasions that intensive care support might be required. Because of course we are also moving the small number of services that rely on level 3 support, because otherwise we would obviously create an unsafe situation. But otherwise, the services maintain their integrity. You're quite right, Councillor, if I might say so, to raise the issue of interrelationships. It's very much at the heart of how we have to plan things, because essentially, whilst we're making incremental changes, often which in all hospitals will take many, many years, everything has to be kept, its integrity has to be maintained throughout that period, and that actually can be quite challenging. But this is designed to do, this combination of things is designed to do exactly that. If I come back to the question about loss of funding, I want to be completely straight with you. We don't actually know, is the answer. It certainly doesn't help if plans get derailed. From afar, especially at this late stage, from afar it looks like something is going seriously awry. There is always a danger. I can't say definitely we would lose the money, but there is a risk that because there are so many requirements for capital across the NHS, that something else will come along. The national people see a stalled project as they would see it from a distance. They sometimes have I mean, it's pejoratively a fairly superficial, so because obviously it's a large country with many things going on. So there is a bit of a danger that if that money's not being spent, we don't want that money going back to the Treasury. Thank you very much. We'll give it to something else. So there's a risk.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your answer.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Cleaver, then Councillor Seaton.
Thank you, Chair. What I would like to see is what my constituents like to see in Ayers Monsell. They like to see honesty, openness and fairness. I spend hours listening to what the people in my ward want to discuss and tell you, and what people in Ayers Monsell ward like is to have proper consultations. They like everything on the table. They'll tell you what they want taking off, and they'll let you know very clearly, and that's fantastic. Mark, without wanting to bore you silly, I'm going to say something that I've said at almost every health scrutiny meeting for years. I absolutely love the National Health Service. The National Health Service, if it wasn't the National Health Service that it was, I would not be here now. I would be dead, because over a 10-day period was in 33 times, and it was a very serious matter. I think personally, and I'm definitely right on this, that we have the best health service in the world. We have an elderly population getting bigger. We have the neonatal unit, which is just unbelievable, and if people haven't been and seen it, take that opportunity. The heart hospital is a typical thing that the population worked with you on, and I know other members have said that. So we absolutely love our health service, and we think that we want to support you in every single thing that you do. So make sure that we always get that opportunity, because I never really agree with grilling people and making people feel so stressed that they leave places and feel unsteady. I'm a person that's positive. I've always been positive. I've had massive support from everybody. But I really think one of the other things, and I've slightly gone off-road, excuse me, Chair, is that whoever the government is, I don't care whoever the government is, we have got to make sure that we fund our NHS services properly, so that we have got staff training, so people in this country can become the fantastic nurses and GPs, and we can fill all the posts. So thank you, Chair, for that little bit of leniency.
No worries. Councillor Seaton.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we've had a very good talking session today. I've not heard many different views coming from people. We are all, I think, singing from the same hymn sheet. It's clear that we all regret the missed opportunity of engaging with the public. It is clear also that the NHS does need to be working towards being sustainable and transforming, but it also should be open and transparent, and that's the opportunity that we've missed. We have been informed that the legal obligations have been met in this case. We've had acknowledgement that best practice has not been followed as they would have liked it to have been. However, we are where we are. Clinical case has been made regarding concentration of staffing beds and other procurement. Lessons hopefully have been learned, but the direction of travel now needs to be forward-looking and not looking at missed opportunities. As I say, I think we're all in one mind in here, and we've all had a very good discussion, and it needs to be done. Go ahead. I'm getting older. I might need it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Seaton. I am going to come in now because I haven't actually expressed my viewpoint, and then maybe if we need to, we can go around. No, Councillor Sangster, please. Thank you. I unfortunately don't agree with you, Councillor Seaton. I don't think we are all entirely on the same hymn sheet. I do think we all agree that it is a large regret that this wasn't foreseen as an issue, and probably public consultation undertaken at an earlier stage, but not entirely certain about the rest of the detail. Going back, I do have to say that I think the conversations that we had at our individual health scrutinies back in 2015 and 2018 with Rutland, we did have the right conversations and we did come to the right decisions at those times. With the information that was given to us. And as I said in the previous meeting, I certainly don't think that any of us would undo those decisions or those conversations. But I do feel quite strongly that the bosses that we have here today have been hiding behind that decision that was made back in 2015. And the fact that that decision, when it was brought to us on a matter of urgency, which is clearly something not necessarily as pressing as we thought it was when it was first presented to us, because the urgency isn't or hasn't materialised. But as I said, I think, I do think we made the right decisions with that information at the time. I also think that subsequent to that, they've been hiding behind us as a scrutiny committee in terms of, well, they approved it, Leicester approved it, Leicestershire approved it, Rutland have approved it, and therefore it's okay, it's been approved. And I do actually think that in many respects they've done a disservice to health scrutiny by putting us in that position, because as I've said clearly, we're not in a position where we are to approve it or not to approve it, and we're here simply to take evidence. I also now feel that they are hiding behind their most recent legal advice. And whilst I recognise that they believe what they have been told to be the absolute, unequivocal case, I don't believe that any of the issues that they've brought to us today are insurmountable. And ultimately, a decision that has been made can be undone and then go out to public consultation and then redone. None of the issues that they've brought to us today in terms of the financial implications on them, the fact that they'll have to manage timelines in terms of delivery of other services, or the fact that they potentially might lose national funding, which I don't think they will. I really don't think they will. None of those are things which convince me that they have fulfilled the principle of public engagement, which they need to have done. I do also believe, and I will, this is going back to a previous point, that there was a gross breach of trust when you repeatedly misrepresented what Leicester City had said in the 2015 meeting. You had gone to Rutland and said that we said consultation was unwarranted. We had never said that. And I do believe there's going to be some work to do in terms of building relationships after that misrepresentation was delivered a number of times within the local media. Not just once, but a number of times was it said that we approved and we didn't approve. That wasn't how we had finished that meeting. So, as I say, we don't think we'd do anything differently now. But, you know, do we want to take this any further? Now, I think, understandably, the gentleman from and the ladies we've got from the NHS here today are going to be upset and disgruntled as they feel that this has been an issue that's been pushed upon them by a few campaigners from here within the city. But I have made this clear and I'll make it clear again that this has become a much broader issue, and the fact that we are seeing local MPs now getting involved with this, one I know has written to them about public consultation, another one has a petition up with about 3,000 signatures on it asking for full consultation, demonstrate that this conversation is far beyond the very loyal campaigners that we have in the room here today. It is a much broader issue than that. And I do feel that this has been an entirely appropriate use of Scrutiny's time. I don't think it's been a waste of our time at all. I think it's been a conversation that is needed to be had and should be had in public. And then this is just my final point of contention, and I don't know whether the members agree with me, but on a number of occasions, and I understand why you do it, you present us with the clinical case as to why something should be done, or why it's good business, or why it will help the staff. And we all have absolute respect for our clinicians, we really do. But society and the public discussion has moved on significantly in the last 20 years. And in fact, actually, the members that are around the table here now are able to grapple with the intricacies of arguments as to whether something makes sense or not, whether that be a clinical argument or a legal argument or what have you. And it's just a note of caution, because I know NHS England are actually somewhat encouraging you to push forward clinicians to say that this is clinical advice and this is the best, the clinicians tell us this is needed. But actually, from sat on this side of the table, it can sometimes, and this is personal, I don't know whether anyone else echoes it, but it can sometimes feel a bit dismissive or patronising to just feel that you can assume to hide behind or sit behind that advice. And so I just give you a note of caution that when presenting in future, use it to help support your arguments, but don't use it as your, well, the clinicians say this, so it must be right type of argument. So, do we take this any further? The conversation for me has always been about whether we should consult, not whether there's a clinical case. I think that everyone around the tables, as Councillor Seaton quite rightly said, we all agree that there is a strong clinical case for the 3-2, and none of us have actually said that we don't think that it's not necessarily the right way forward for the public. Have they consulted health scrutiny? Well, unfortunately, I'd like to say, I would probably say that they have now adequately consulted health scrutiny. I don't think they had up until the more recent meetings that we've had as a joint committee. I don't think relying on the 2015 ones was sufficient, but I do think that they have brought a good clinical case to us now, and also a clear legal case to us now. So in terms of their duty to us as a committee, I would say I feel that they have discharged that duty. We have made it quite clear, I think, from speaking with our legal advice here, that because they have fulfilled that duty, there is no desire for us to refer it to the Secretary of State. This in itself will provide another long delay, which is a very long legal process, and is something that would act as a barrier. However, that doesn't mean to say that we can't ask for a short pause to go out to full consultation. I do think, as I said before, none of the arguments that you've put forward to today are insurmountable. I do think you've misread the public mood. There's a lot of affection for the Leicester General Hospital, but there's also a lot of sympathy for the financial position that you see yourself in. And in fact, actually going out to full consultation gives you the opportunity to bring people along with you. And if I just go back to something that I'd said in the... read it out in my first statement when this first came to the Leicester City Scrutiny Committee, is that people need the opportunities to discuss major changes to their local services in order to be reassured that the service will not adversely be affected. Change is always a concern, but change without the opportunity to challenge and discuss can feel very threatening. The NHS needs to recognise that with the level of change that they are about to embark upon, they need to engage with the public earlier in a more meaningful way. And whilst I don't wish upon you the delays of a referral to Secretary of State or judicial review, I do think you could potentially still accommodate a small full public consultation. Now, I put together a motion last night ahead of this meeting. I have circulated it to all members of the committee. There are a couple of amendments that have come back on that motion from the County Council. Nothing that in substance changed the motion at all. Are members of the committee happy for me to introduce that motion? Yeah? Just to, as a matter of foresight for the bosses, I'm just calling the bosses now. We haven't got a short, snappy term for you. I put together a motion which I knew the main substance of which will be agreed by all of the Commission, and that is what I will read out first and get members to agree on. We then have option 1 or option 2. One of those will be to ask for recommend for public consultation, and the other one will just be to note your position. Again, I will read those out and we'll take a vote on that. Firstly, if I can read out though the amended version of the motion as per County Council's amendments. The motion is 1. That this committee recognises the strong argument in the clinical case to consolidate level 3 intensive care services at the Leicester Royal Infirmary and Glenfield Hospital, and understand the proposals to move the service. Second one is the committee also believes that the CCG and UHL have now fulfilled their statutory duty to consult the scrutiny via this committee, and would therefore be inappropriate to refer to the Secretary of State on these grounds. Number 3, it is not for the committee to comment on whether the CCGs and UHL have discharged their duty to consult the public. Excuse me, it's just been altered. This may be a matter that the committee notes could be tested by judicial review against the CCG's decision. Number 4, there is deep regret that the CCG and UHL did not listen to public calls for increased engagement / consultation after the business case had been passed by the board in November 2017. We believe it was an oversight not to go to public consultation whilst they were in the formative stages of their proposals. Number 5, this committee therefore requests the UHL Trust and CCG A. Provide the committee with a detailed project plan for the relocation of the services. B. Provide regular updates on the progress of works and any variations to the plans. C. To meet with the committee or its representatives if there are any concerns raised by them about the implementation of the proposals. D. To provide the committee with more detailed information around the sustainability of existing services at the Leicester General Hospital once the level 3 services have been removed, and more detail around the escalation process. E. Immediately undertake public engagement on the major reconfiguration plans. And F. Undertake as soon as possible formal public consultation on the major reconfiguration plans. Can I ask, I've put my glasses back on, can I ask if I can propose that motion? Have I got a seconder? Councillor Dr Limore, thank you. And if I can ask members to show whether they support that motion. Okay, I think that's unanimous. Thank you. On to the more uncertain element of our proposals. I'm going to go for the option that I would propose personally first, and we'll see how that goes. This is an addition to that first motion. Despite all of the information provided to the committee by the CCG and UHL, we are not convinced that any of the reasons given preclude their responsibility to carry out public consultation. As such, in the interests of openness and transparency, the committee recommend that the CCG and UHL undertake public consultation before continuing with the proposals. Option 2, just for those members who wanted to hear it before they voted. Option 2 would be, as such, the committee notes that the CCG and UHL have determined that it is still necessary to proceed with the proposal to consolidate Level 3 services. So, if we go back to option 1, do members want me to repeat that? Or is everyone happy that they understood? Happy that they understood? Okay. Therefore, I'd like to propose option 1, that we recommend that the CCG and UHL undertake public consultation before continuing with the proposals. And with that, can I have everyone show their hands? Thank you. Is that carried? I believe that's carried. Or do you want me to vote on option 2 as well? Oh yes, apologies. Yes, against. just a small technicality. Those against. Are there any abstentions after that? 6 against. Are there any abstentions? No. Okay. Well, I count that motion as carried in that case. Agreed. Thank you all for attending the meeting today, particularly yourselves. As I've made clear, this is only a recommendation. Where you take that from now is entirely at your discretion. We are not going to comment on whether we feel you've fulfilled your public law duty in terms of public engagement, but we would like to see public engagement. I think with that, I think we've fulfilled our business today, and I'll declare the meeting closed.